Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances. All flows to Srila Prabhupada. So today we will continue our discussion on Nectar of Instruction. We will be studying text 2. Atyahar prayaschascha prajalpo niyamagraha janasangascha lolyam cha sadbir bhaktir vinashyati. One's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities. 1. Eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required. 2. Over endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain. 3. Talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters. 4. Practicing the spiritual rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically. 5. Associating with worldly minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. And 6. Being greedy for mundane achievements. So this verse transitions from the material mode of goodness that was spoken about in the previous text to devotional service. So in the last line you will see Rupa Goswami uses Sadbir Bhaktir Vinashyati. So now we know that he is talking specifically about devotional service. So in text 1, the 6 items that were mentioned, Vachuvegam, Manasukrodha Vegam, they were bringing the quality of a dhira, or a person who is morally advanced, who's on a platform of sense control. This verse is now talking about the subsequent stages for such a person, which is that the person uses the platform of the mode of goodness to begin the process of devotional service. And since devotional service from a material platform is something new, such a practitioner will immediately encounter obstacles. So Rupa Goswami is giving us a sneak preview into what are the obstacles that a newly practicing devotee will encounter as they take to bhakti or as they endeavor to progress in bhakti. So this is a thematic analysis of Srila Prabhupada's purport. He talks about broadly 2 categories. How do these 6 things spoil devotional service, and what is the advantage of avoiding them? And then under the first category, he will talk more about each of the 6, Satyahara, Priyascha, Prajalpo. So we will follow the structure as we expand on the explanation of this verse. So this verse is all about material impediments to spiritual practices. So Srila Prabhupada first tries to answer the question that why should there be material impediments to spiritual practices? If spirituality is completely different and independent, like sometimes it's said like oil and water, that if it maintains its unique distinctive identity, then why is Sri Rupa Goswami talking about material impediments to this? So in order to do so, Srila Prabhupada steps back and gives us a holistic view. So first he talks about the 3 energies of Krishna. The Bhairangi Shakti, which is the material energy or the external energy, this whole creation. The spiritual world comes under his Atarangani Shakti, and the Jivas are Tathastha Shakti. So even though Jivas are fully spiritual, they are still not considered to be Antarangni because they have a tendency to be under the control of either the Bhairangi or the Antarangni Shakti. So conditioned jivas are under the control of Krishna's external energy, which is also known as Maya Shakti. And while they maintain their spiritual identity, in the conditioned state, they identify themselves as material. So the example is given as that of children. So for all practical purposes, the children are adults, small adults, right? But because they are so young, they need to be constantly guided. So similarly, the jivas are fully spiritual, but because they are so minute, they always have to be controlled. Now they have the choice in terms of who controls them, and that's how sometimes they become conditioned and come into the material world, and often they are liberated and remain in the spiritual world. So when they are controlled by the spiritual energy, they are established in their constitutional position. When they are under the material energy, they are conditioned. So what does the word condition mean? That they are conditioned to think of themselves as material even though they are not. So because of this conditioning, all the activities that they perform are also under the control of the material energy. So that is why there are material obstacles to spiritual activities. It does not mean that bhakti has material obstacles. What it means is that the conditioned living entity has material obstacles when executing bhakti. Yeah, so that distinction is important to understand. So what Srila Rupa Goswami is doing in these two verses is that he is talking about the 6 impediments to bhakti enunciated because of the false concept of self that is arising from a conditioned existence. So the result of this conditioned existence is 3 kinds of miseries. Right? So they are known as Adideva Klesha, which are caused by demigods, such as droughts, earthquakes, storms, forces of nature. Then Adibhautika Klesha is caused by other living entities, such as attack by animals or insects or by other humans, enemies. And Adhyatmic Klesha is caused by one's own body and mind, such as one's physical infirmities, the body gets diseases, or the mind, sometimes the body is healthy but the mind is troubled. So all conditioned souls are subject to these 3 miseries by the control of the external energy, and they suffer various difficulties. So these difficulties manifest in all endeavors, whether they are material or spiritual. Right? So we can now understand that these obstacles to bhakti are not coming because bhakti is anyway dependent on any material aspects, but because the practitioner of bhakti is materially conditioned. Because the practitioner is subject to these 3 kleshas. As the person advances in one's spirituality and the material conditioning weakens, then these kleshas weaken and the obstacles to bhaktis also dissolve. So Prabhupada talks about the real purpose of religion. That religion entails understanding the laws of God, because the proper execution of these laws ultimately leads one out of material entanglement. That is the true purpose of religion. Unfortunately, people accept religion for material prosperity because of atyahara or an excessive desire for such prosperity. True religion, however, instructs people to be satisfied with the bare necessities while cultivating Krishna consciousness. So, as one follows the principles of dharma, then one is emancipated from these three kleshas. And the obstacles to bhakti become weaker and weaker. And Prabhupada uses the example of atyahara, that unfortunately religion itself, when it is not understood properly, is misinterpreted as a way for material prosperity. That if you fast, you will get wealth, or if you do certain rituals, you will get health, etc. The whole realm of demigod worship. So essentially, what is this doing is, it is perpetuating material existence. And the obstacles to bhakti remain as strong as ever. Perhaps they even strengthen, right? Which is defeating the purpose of the actual real religion. And then Prabhupada quotes Srimad Bhagavatam 129, that all occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service, dharma, should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. Right? It clearly covers two situations. One should not use dharma for artha or kama. And the second is, even if one gets material gains, just without even atyahara, one gets material gain, one should not use it to cultivate sense gratification. Then another verse relevant in this is, any person who desires the fruits of the four principles, religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and at the end, liberation, should engage himself in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for worship of his lotus feet yields the fulfillment of all these. So this is kind of like a companion verse, even though it comes later on in the Bhagavatam. So this says that by artha, kam and moksha, right, by using religiosity for material purposes, one will never acquire any real happiness. But on the other hand, a person who pursues the principles of religion sincerely automatically attains dharmarth, kam and moksha. They may not be interested in it, but all that is automatically available to it. So let's go over each one of them. Atyahara is overeating or too much collecting. Like ahar is food, and atyahar is too much food or too much collecting. Ahar in that case is material objects. So the root problem with atyahar is that it reduces faith in Krishna. So in the Upadeśāmṛta, the very first mantra talks about the Ishavāsyam principle. Ishavāsyam idam sarvam yat kinchit jagatam jagat. That one should only consume what is set aside as your quota. And then one can live a life free of entanglement. Right? So Atyahara is essentially violating the Ishavasya principle, right? Which the consequences are given in mantra 3, that such a person is called Atmaha, or the killer of the soul, in the sense that they deny the real purpose of existence of the soul, which is to connect and serve Krishna. Right? So this is the root problem of Atyahara, that it goes against the Ishavasya principle of accepting what Krishna has given you as quota, and only be satisfied with that. So Atyahara relates to both eating more than required and collecting more than needed. Right. Now again, these are contextual items. Right? So and they are related to one's ashram. For instance, a grahastha is allowed to collect certain amount of wealth, but not sannyasis, not brahmacharis, right? So there is a certain contextual application of it. Srila Prabhupada expertly he demonstrates that how Atyahara is artificial by giving the example of the animal kingdom. Right? He says that if a bag of rice is placed in a public place, birds will come and eat a few grains and go away. A human being will, however, take away the whole bag. He will eat all his stomach can hold and then try to keep the rest in storage. Right? So this is Atyahara. This is a good example that only taking what is needed to satisfy your hunger is Ishavasya. But taking much more than that and storing it and accumulating it is Atyahara. And because of Atyahara, the person will suffer, because now that he has a bag of rice, he will try and protect it, he will worry about it, he will feel proud that I have more rice than anybody else. And the rest of the world will suffer because there are 10 other people who could have eaten from the bag of rice, they cannot eat. So everyone is suffering, the person who has taken the bag and the person who do not get the bag. So in his Anuvriti commentary, Bhakti Saraswati Thakur writes that too much endeavor, either in the shape of scientific knowledge or monetary gains, falls in the category of Atyahara. According to Srimad Bhagavatam, the endeavor of spiritual speculators to write volumes of book on dry philosophy devoid of Krishna consciousness is entirely futile. So Bhakti Siddhanta extends the notion of Atyahara to mundane knowledge also. So just like one is collecting money, there may be another person collecting degrees and writing mundane books, or just collecting different mundane topics which do not serve any real purpose. Real purpose meaning taking one closer to Krishna. Another form of Atyahara is attempting to build a large inheritance for future generations. And so many times people are pragmatic enough to understand that they already have a lot more than what they need. But then they start thinking about the inheritance that they will bestow on their future generations. Prabhupada gives an example of how a karmi who accumulated a lot of wealth for his children and died. And because he was so attached to both the wealth and his children, he took birth in a cobbler's family nearby. And then when he grew up, his own children would beat him by the shoes. So the point Prabhupada makes is that if one is not able to secure one's own future, how can one secure the future of future generations? Or if you flip it aside, that the real way to secure the future of future generations is by taking to Krishna consciousness. Like Krishna benedicts those who become his devotees. Krishna is very kindly inclined to their future generations. Then Srila Prabhupada also mentions that every living entity comes with its own supply of food. Right? So this is the quota, the Isha Vasi. So by nature's arrangement, an elephant and an ant are being supported. When one collects more than needed, the person is demonstrating lack of faith in the arrangement made by Krishna and is stealing someone else's quota. So in this context, there is a pastime of when Mahaprabhu was traveling on his South India yatra, then as a sannyasi, he was just begging enough alms for the particular meal. Now, in that it so happened that one of the persons gave in charity a very special kind of rice that Govindas was his personal servant who was accompanying him, that Govindas he could make some kind of payasam out of it that Mahaprabhu really liked. So Govindas, he asked for a larger quantity of donation. And from that, for every day, small amounts, he would make payasam and give to Mahaprabhu. And then Mahaprabhu noticed that this really special rice, which is not easily available, every day he's getting that payasam. So he asked him. And then Govinda said, this is what happened, that somebody gave me and I kept the rice with me. And Mahaprabhu was so upset. And he said that you clearly do not have the mind of a devotee. You do not have faith in Krishna's ability to provide. That is why you yourself are hoarding. In fact, he was so upset that he asked him to leave. And later on, of course, he forgave him. But, and of course, Mahaprabhu was in the ashram of sannyas, so he was demonstrating it to the extreme. But the mood is that one should have faith in Krishna's ability to provide, because at the end of the day, even if you make arrangements for yourself, there is no guarantees that it will be sufficient for you. And there's a saying that Krishna can give with 10 hands, he can take with 10 hands. And so there are people who accumulate a lot of wealth and they lose it all. So over endeavor distills the faith, because there's an implicit statement that is being made that I do not have faith in the Lord's quota set aside for me. And then it consumes energy. Right? So one has to divert the energy that they could use for spiritual practices in Atyahara. It creates a false sense of ownership and pride. Right? When a person becomes rich, then the person surveys and says, okay, this is my empire, this is all I have. So, Aham Karta, Aham Bhogi, Aham Balwan. So, person says, I am the doer, I am the enjoyer, I am the most powerful. Right? And that brings the person in conflict of the need for humility and bhakti. Okay, the second is prayaschas or over endeavoring. So Atyahara is what causes prayas. Right? So in order to collect more than needed, one has to perform more endeavor than needed. So for example, if a person needs $1,000 to live in a month, so there's a certain endeavor that is needed to make that $1,000. But then the person starts saying that even though I need $1,000, I will try to get $10,000 so that I can save the remaining 9,000. Now the prayas also increases. Now instead of work for 1,000, the person has to work for 10,000. So atyahara is the result and prayas is the effort that goes behind it. And the reason that they are given separately is because they may not always go hand in hand. Right? So there may be a time where even despite excessive effort, the result may be meager. Right? So a person may work very hard, lot of prayas, but he may not get anything or he may not use anything. Right? Um, so that is one situation. The other is that the person may work hard and spend everything. Right? So then there is really no atyahara, right? Because the person earns $10,000 and spends $10,000. Then there may also be the situation where without much prayas, the person gets a lot and gets attached to it. For instance, the person may inherit wealth. So not because of their effort, but just because of their situation, they inherit wealth and then they hoard it. Right? So sometimes atyahara and prayas will be commensurate, but sometimes they may not, which is why Rupa Goswami calls it out separately. The problem with prayas is that it is an aberration of the karma kanda principle. And Srila Prabhupada explains that it violates the real purpose of religion. So in the Bhagavatam, Sutta Goswami says that life's desire should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's work. Right? So one's endeavor should be capped at a reasonable basis. Right? So it's not that one should under endeavor to the point that they become lazy, they don't get food, they starve, or they get diseases. So that is taking it into the mode of ignorance. So one should endeavor enough that one has a healthy life and one is able to preserve oneself. After that, whatever endeavor that one does should be to make spiritual advancement. And that's what should be the goal of one's life. Then this prayastas can be in all aspects. So it could be karma prayas, which is ugra karma, performing a lot of activities. Gyan prayas, which is too much intellectual investment. Yoga prayas, too much investment in yoga. Right? And the reason they are over endeavoring is because of the results that are coming. In Kram Prayas, one accumulates a lot of wealth. Gyan Prayas, one accumulates a lot of knowledge. Yoga Prayas, one may accumulate a lot of siddhis. But none of them are conducive to one's spiritual advancement. Now one may say that is there something called Bhakti Prayas, over endeavoring in Bhakti, and it is generally not considered, right, unless one is using Bhakti for non-devotional purposes. Then it is Bhakti Prayas. And even then Bhakti is a bit of a misnomer over there because it's not really Bhakti but looks like Bhakti. Like sometimes people they appear to be performing a lot of devotional service and because of that they get fame, fortune, followers, and that is prayas in the context of bhakti, but otherwise there's nothing like over endeavoring in bhakti because it's the natural position of the jiva. Third is prajalpa or idle talk. Right? So this is also a symptom of vachovegam. If you cannot control your speech, then what will happen is prajalpa. So what is the nature of prajalpa? That it is useless and mostly about others. Right? Now, sometimes talking about others is helpful when it is glorifying them or for their benefit. So the intention should be there, but generally, idle talk is mostly criticizing others. So Prajalpa is typically in the mood of envy. It may be obvious or covered, but Prajalpa is generally driven by envy. Prabhupada said Prajalpa also includes reading newspaper, books of fiction, solving crossword puzzles, and other material things that have no real value. So the index that Prabhupada is applying, Rupa Goswami is applying, is that does this help one advance in Krishna consciousness? If not, Prajalpa. So people who indulge in Prajalpa invariably end up in offensive behavior. They develop envy for others, right? Because from speaking, actions also come. So if you spend all your time criticizing somebody, then you will become offensive to that person, even though you may be thinking I'm criticizing the person behind the back. But the nature of Prajalpa is that it develops that mentality, and then one actually becomes envious and offensive to that person. The nature of Prajalpa is that it settles to the lowest common denominator. Right? So what this means is that if there are three people who are indulging in Prajalpa, then the person who is the most offensive, who has the most envy, will bring the other two people down to their level. That's the nature of Prajalpa. Because when one indulges in it, one is already signaling a willingness to go down that path. And if somebody else is further down the path, that person will pull them. And what this results is a vitiated consciousness. Prabhupada gives the example of a frog croaking. He said that's an example of Prajalpa. He gives the similar example for Vachuvegam also, that attracts the snake. So similarly, conditioned jiva in Prajalpa is unaware that the snake of time is appearing. Another way of saying that it's a waste of time. Then Niyamagra, rules and regulations. So this is an interesting one because depending on whether the A is taken as short or long, agraha with a long A means eagerness to accept, and agraha with a short A means failure to accept. So by adding niyam, so niyam means rules and regulations. So when you add niyam to these two possible meanings, then niyamagraha can mean one of the two things. One is that eagerly accepting some of the scripture's rules and regulations for immediate economic benefit. So this is niyam agraha, which is the long A. So this is eagerly accepting scripture rules and regulations, right? This is mostly people who eagerly accept karma kand in order to make material advancement. And the second is failure to accept the rules and regulations of the shastras, which is equivalent to acting whimsically. So various examples of niyamagra is following rules just for the sake of following the rules, not understanding their means to an end, right? So this is eagerly accepting, but without full understanding. And this we see a lot amongst. So when rules are followed without understanding, they become rituals, or in extreme case, they become superstitions. So people just do it, and they have no understanding why they're doing it. And because they become simply attached to the following of the rules, they become very upset when anything is changed. fanatical following of the rules out of pride or ignorance without understanding the purpose behind them. Right? So this is something that the Smarta Brahmins have a tendency to do that. And so they will be very, with a lot of proud sense, with a lot of pride, they will say that whatever rules that I always take bath in the cold water at 4 o'clock, or I I follow this and this vandanams, etc. And it gives them a lot of pride, and they're attached to it, but they have no understanding of why to do it. And the reason you have a bath in the morning is so that you can attend Mangalarti. But if you're just taking a bath, it's just taking a bath. What's the purpose? What's the advantage of it? Then other form of Niyamagra is what is known as Ugra Vratas. So Ugra Vratas is taking vows that are very, very difficult. And these vows are taken mostly for material gain or fame. So like if you go to Govardhan, sometimes you'll see people performing Dandavat Parikrama, which is very difficult, right? You, instead of walking, you give obeisances and do, but ask them why they are doing. Some of them will say, I'm doing because of to get children. And this is known as Yugal Parikrama, where the husband and the wife kind of in tandem, they do it. I remember once I was doing parikrama, and the person was not doing Dandavat, but he was doing parikrama, and I was just talking to him, and he said, "I'm doing it so that Mr. Modi becomes the prime minister, right? Just for political gains." There's always advantage of devotional service, but this is niyamagraha, that you're hijacking it for material purposes. Then niyam agraha is whimsically rejecting rules as per convenience, right? Because like in some cases, the devotees, even after initiation, they reject the fourth regulative principle of abstinence from sex, right? And they say we are three reg devotees. Sometimes devotees, they reject the 16 rounds. Say, well, chanting is chanting. My 8 rounds is as good as somebody's 16 rounds. Or they'll come with different reasons that rather than chanting 16 imperfect rounds, I'm happy chanting one perfect round, right? So they'll come up with different reasons. So that's because they do not understand the principle behind this niyams. Then following material rules, even if they compromise spiritual practices. And so some of these rules may be cultural, some of them may be imposed by the society, and some people may follow it and compromise the spiritual practices. Right? Some people might say, I don't eat onion garlic at home, but when I go out, I eat it because I don't want to insult the guest, the host. And it's important to give to honor or respect the host, right? So yes, it's important to honor and respect the host, but not at the cost of compromising your spiritual practices. Then whimsically not following material rules, right? So these are people who compromise morality under the guise of spirituality. So like in the earlier days, devotees would steal to provide for the deities. Like Prabhupada was once sitting and he saw Malti Mataji, she was stealing milk from a milk truck. And the milk was being used to prepare payasam for the deities. Prabhupada caught her and said, why are you stealing milk? She said, well, for this purpose. And Prabhupada said, no, you don't have to steal for Krishna. He has everything. So similarly, during book distribution, sometimes people would compromise the principles to distribute book. So Prabhupada would say that a devotee is a perfect gentleman, which means that he or she always does the honorable thing. So in conclusion, one must understand the purpose of the rules and the nature of the rules. Based on that, one should decide to follow them and not follow them. Right? So this is what? This is karma with gyan. That you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. Because karma without gyan becomes ritualistic. And conversely, gyan without karma becomes mental speculation. But here the recommendation is that they both go hand in hand. So for example, Mahaprabhu, Srila Prabhupada, he broke the rule of sannyas. Sannyasis are not supposed to cross water. Right? So he broke the rule of sannyas, but he understood the purpose. That the purpose of sannyasis not traveling too much is so that they can stay and preach. But he understood that he was crossing the ocean in order to achieve the same purpose. Another example is in California, once Prabhupada's disciple took him to a nudist camp where everybody was naked, and Prabhupada was calmly preaching to them Krishna consciousness, and many of them actually joined the movement from there. Right, and there were men and women over there. Now, sannyasi is not supposed to go to a place where there are women without clothes, but Prabhupada understood that this is an opportunity to give Krishna to them. Now, another example is that general recommendation is to finish your chanting in the morning. But there are pujaris who get up for Mangalarti. They have to get up at 3 o'clock. Now, for them, if they have to chant, then they have to get up at 1 o'clock and chant, which is often not feasible. So then this is the practicality of amending the rule. And so the recommendation is get up at early in the morning to chant, but the pujaris are doing deity worship, they can chant later on. So there's full understanding of the purpose behind which the rule is being amended. There's a pastime in Chaitanya Charitamrita that once Prabhupada, once Mahaprabhu, he was in the highest stage of ecstasy, and he was displaying Mahabhav. So his whole body was stiff, and he was lying he was kind of lying, blocking the door. So his servant Govinda Das, he wanted to massage the body of Mahaprabhu, because Mahaprabhu's body was almost shrunk, like his muscles were strung hard. But Mahaprabhu was blocking the door and the oil was on the other side. So Govinda, he stepped over the body of Mahaprabhu, took the oil and massaged him. Now, in Vedic tradition, it's considered to be impolite to step over the body, and especially when the body happens to belong to the personality of Godhead, right? So Govinda was aware of it, but then he still did it. And after he massaged, he stayed over there till morning. So when morning Mahaprabhu woke, then he asked him, why have you been, what are you doing over here? So Govinda Das said, yes, I came over here, got the oil and massaged your body. And then I have been sitting over here since night. And Mahaprabhu said, why are you sitting over here? You could have just stepped back over me and gone back. And then Govinda Das said that it was okay for me to break the rules when it was as a service to you. But it is not okay for me to break rules when it is a service to myself. Right? So this is an expert application of when to and when not to break the rules. Another pastime is the gopis, that once Krishna in Dwarka said he had a headache, and Narad Muni came and said, how can I cure it? And Krishna said, get me the dust from the lotus feet of my devotees, I'll sprinkle it on my head and I'll get better. And Narad Muni went around asking everybody, Krishna's wives and the devotees, and they all said, no. How can we give our dust to the Lord? We'll go to hell. And then he came to Vrindavan, he asked the gopis, and the gopis quickly said, okay, go ahead and take it. So Narad Muni thought that they're simple village girls, they don't understand. So then he said that, don't you understand that you're giving your lotus So you're giving the dust of your feet to Krishna and he sprinkles it on his head, you will be condemned to live in hell for eternity. And the gopi said, yeah, we know that. But rather better for us to suffer eternity in hell than for our Krishna to have even a moment of headache. And so, happily willing to break the rules for the service of the Lord. Similarly, fasting, right? Prabhupada said health, sadhana, and seva in that order. That first take care of your health, then your sadhana, and then your seva. Like some people perform extreme austerities, and then their health becomes bad. So when the health becomes bad, then the sadhana automatically suffers. And there are some people who will compromise their sadhana for seva. Now, they will say, okay, I don't have time to chant because I have to go and cook the Sunday feast. Or I don't have time to read because I have to do this service somewhere. So Prabhupada said one should have this clear priority. First take care of your health, then take care of your sadhana, and then take care of seva. Because really speaking, if you don't take care of sadhana, then eventually your seva will suffer. So sadhana is really the fuel that powers the engine of seva. And bodily health, from a more material perspective, is what enables both sadhana and seva. If there is a conflict in the guiding principle, if there's a conflict, the guiding principle is to give up the less important rule for the more important one, right? And this is again subjective. This is where the importance of taking shelter of the guru is there, because there are many rules and regulations in terms of deity worship, chanting, Vaishnava seva, and the devotee also has material aspirations. So how to prioritize it? People often ask these questions from sannyasis. I have a busy work schedule. How do I make time for chanting? Or I like serving in the temple, but that means I do not chant. So then by the perspective of the more experienced devotee, one can prioritize that this is more important, this is less important. I heard sannyasi says chanting is the foundation of your spiritual life. You can give up everything, but you cannot give up chanting. Once a disciple came to Prabhupada saying that I'm serving 21 hours in a day, and I'm not able to get time for chanting. And then Prabhupada said, you stop your service and chant. And so the disciple said, well, the purpose of chanting is to get service. Since I've already got service, why should I stop my chanting? And factually what happens is that if you don't chant, you will not be able to do the service. And so Prabhupada was looking at it from a long-term perspective. So the principle is that whatever we do should help us to make spiritual advancements. Like for sadhakas, the guiding principle is always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna, right? So when they evaluate the principles, they evaluate it in this context. Does this help me remember Krishna? Does it prevent me from forgetting Krishna? And one must be careful when adjusting rules only after consulting with Guru and sadhus, right? Because while Vaishnavism has this beauty of flexibility, it is not too rigid. But then the flexibility should be carefully used. And one should not arbitrarily say that I feel that this is more important than that, so let me prioritize this. Because when we make decisions, firstly, we lack objectivity, and second is we do not have the spiritual perspective. So that is why important to consult with Guru and other senior devotees. Okay, fifth is Jansangas, which is association with worldly minded people, right? Essentially, people not interested in Krishna consciousness, right? So Narottam Das Thakur, he says Bhakti Sanyavas, that he prays for it. Janme Janme Oye Bhakti Sanyavas, that birth after birth, I should only get the association of the devotees. And this is because association is very, very powerful. We'll see this theme of association coming over and over again. Um, so anecdotally, you see that people who are engaged in the similar line of business, they associate with people also in that line of business to make advancement. So we have all these conferences of pharmaceuticals. So all the people who are in the pharma industry, they come together. Or conference for people who are in robotics. And the reason they come together is because that's what helps them make further advancement. So similarly, when devotees associate with devotees, then they're inspired to make advancement. When devotees associate with non-devotees, then they tend to go down the stream of non-devotees. Right. So I have this personal experience that sometimes I go to gatherings where predominantly people are non-devotees, and the talks over there are typically centered around sports or the stock market, and there'll be somebody saying that I made so much money in the stock market, this stock is really doing well, and this is what might make a person a millionaire. And then the other persons, without even realizing it, they become drawn by that. Right? So then that's what they will also think. So when devotees are in that situation, then that's what they will think, and will take their attention from their spiritual advancement. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a famous conversation between Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy, in which Mahaprabhu asks him that what is the most powerful catalyst to bhakti? And Ramananda Roy says association to devotees. Right? So this is the opposite of that. Association of the devotees will be spoken in the next verse. Then if you look at the 7 aims with which Srila Prabhupada established ISKCON, 2 of them are in the context of association. So he says that to bring the members of the society together with each other and nearer to Krishna. Right? So the idea of the society is that like-minded people come together. In this case, people who are like-minded in the desire to go nearer to Krishna. And the second is to bring members closer for the purpose of teaching a simpler, more natural way of life. Right? So you see how Prabhupada is, but talking about that how association can also address atyahara and prayashtas. That when you associate with people who are living simply, you have a desire to live simply. Like one of the recommendations is that sannyasis should not spend too much time with grahasthas. Because just by the ashram, the grahasthas lead an opulent life, or a relatively opulent life, and the sannyasis lead a frugal life. But when the sannyasis spend too much time with grahasthas, they might develop attachment or envy. So that's why that separation is recommended. So similarly, amongst practicing devotees also, if they associate too much with materialists, they might see the peer and go to the person's house. He has a big house, he has a swimming pool, a tennis court, and 3 cars in the driveway, and then that person might get influenced by that and say, well, at least let me get 2 cars, if not 3 cars. At least let me get a half a pool, if not a full pool, and then it takes away the attention. So Jan Sangha, the explicit meaning is it forbids the association with materially minded people. Association means close and extended association, right? Doesn't mean that as soon as you see a non-devotee you cross the road, but taking association, extended and intimate association, also forbids the association of devotees with different conception. If you associate a lot with the Mayavadis, it might bewilder you. Like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would say that you should never hear from impersonalists. It's like poison. Even different sampradayas. So even though they may be bona fide Vaishnava sampradayas, because they practice spirituality in a little different way, too much association will confuse. people, right? They may have slightly different tattva gyan. It may be bona fide, but it is different, and that may create confusion. So it is not forbidden, because it's ultimately you're associating with other devotees, but not recommended also, because empirically it's been seen, especially in the earlier stages of devotional life, when one is themselves trying to establish their identity as a devotee. If they are exposed to too many conceptions, then it will be difficult for them to distill them. Okay, so the recommendation is one should try and associate with devotees of a similar conception with comparable advancement. So these are recommendations, not prohibitions. Associating with one who's too advanced may also create confusion, because a person who's too advanced may be operating at a different level, and one who is not that advanced, they may get confused by some of the what they say, how they act, or they may start emulating them artificially. So ideal association is similar conception and comparable advancement. How to avoid jansanga, right? So given that unwanted association is inevitable in the material world, especially for grahastha working devotees, they have to go to work. So when it is not avoidable, the effort should be to minimize its impact. And Prabhupada gives various ways. Pre-planning. Right? Pre-planning means taking a book to read or taking a lecture to hear. So when you are going to be away from devotees in the association of non-devotees, then planning around it helps. Then this concept of giving association but not taking, right? So which means that one attempts to communicate their perspective, but one does not take too much of the other's perspective. Go out in pairs, right? Prabhupada would say there's safety in numbers, that if one person is weakening, the other person is there to support, or both of them give support to each other. Associate in other forms if alone, right? Books and lectures are a typical way. Prasadam, right? Sometimes when people travel, they find that eating food outside, it's a form of jansanga, because you're eating food that is cooked by people who are material consciousness. So to protect of that, pre-planning, take prasadam wherever possible. Then do not open the heart too much with non-devotees. Comes in the category of give association, not taking. So even it's like the ninth offense against the holy name, preaching to those who are not devotees. That when you open the heart too much, the others will either criticize you, or they will condemn you, or they will make fun of you, or they may make fun of Krishna. Right? You say that Krishna is my life and soul, and the other person will say my wife is my life and soul. I don't care about Krishna. So from just being innocent bystanders, they now become malicious offenders. Right? So it's not helpful to them, not helpful to you also. Then do not associate too closely with the opposite sex under the guise of preaching. And so sometimes, because there's a natural attraction to the opposite sex, then men preach to women and women preach to men, and at least in the history of ISKCON there will be many fall downs because of this, or sannyasis giving too much time to women disciples, or spending too much time with them. So another form of jansanga that should be avoided. So laulyam is the sixth and the last, which is ardent longing or greed. So one should avoid association with mayavadis, bhakti kamis, mukti kamis, siddhi kamis. So such people are also classified as atyaharas, or over endeavoring for material gain. This comes in the category of atyahara, jansanga, as well as lolyam. So why would one associate with a bhukti kami? Because the person has greed for material advancement. Or mukti kami, because the person has greed for liberation. Or siddhi kami, because the person has greed for mystic opulences. So even though they are mystical, mukti and siddhi, they are mystical, but essentially they do not take one close to Krishna. Right? So Prabhupada says that all attempts to acquire such material benefits are so-called spiritual advancements. So externally, liberation looks like it's a spiritual advancement, but it does not lead to the path of Krishna consciousness. So too much of attraction for this. For example, the jnanis, they become mukti kamis, right? They have too much of greed for liberation, and because of that, they're not able to perform devotional service. So Prabhupada gives us, so as I mentioned, all Prabhupada's purports. Rupa Goswami writes this book for practicing devotees, and Prabhupada also expands on it by giving specific instructions to those who are practicing. Right? So he says all forms of isms fail because they do not understand the Ishavasya principle. So isms meaning communism, socialism, and other forms of isms. So they are all there in a hope to improve the situation of welfare of the person. But because they do not understand the Ishavasya principle of the Krishna owning everything and everybody else simply taking a quota, ultimately they fail. Prabhupada gives an example of a person finds a lost dollar and could do one of three things. The person may simply take the dollar, even though the dollar does not belong to him. It's like a bhukti kami. This is most of the materialists, that they're constantly looking to take what is not theirs, what is not their quota. Or the person might say that, oh, I'm so renounced, I will leave it. So while the person is not contaminated by the sin of stealing, but he does not make any real progress. So these are mukti or siddhi kamis, right? So they try to go to the position of neutrality. Or the person may find the honor and return to it. So these are the devotees. So they understand that what they get is from Krishna, and they try to use it back in the service of Krishna. Prabhupada says when human society gives up these elementary forms enumerated by Srila Rupa Goswami, Bhayahari, etc., all enmity will cease between men and animals, capitalists and communists, and so forth. In addition, all problems of political and economical maladjustment and instability will be solved. This pure consciousness is awakened by proper spiritual education and practice offered scientifically by the Krishna consciousness movement. This Krishna consciousness movement offers a spiritual community that can bring about a peaceful condition in the world. Every intelligent man should purify his consciousness and rid himself of the above mentioned 6 hindrances to devotional service by taking wholehearted shelter of this Krishna consciousness movement. And so Srila Prabhupada essentially is presenting that how the Krishna consciousness movement, and specifically he's talking in the context of ISKCON, it gives an opportunity to protect oneself from these 6 failings. So what is the conclusion? That when the human society gives up these elementary faults, all enmity will cease. Right? So restating the same points. Ultimately, when one is consciously protecting themselves from these 6 weaknesses or defects, then one is removing the obstacles to make spiritual advancement. And that will take one to the next verse, where Rupa Goswami will talk about the 6 items that are conducive to spiritual advancement. It's like you're driving a car. One is you have your foot on the brake, right? So it's going to slow the car down. Now you take your foot off the brake and then you put your feet on the accelerator. Now it is going fast. So this verse talks about taking your foot off the brake, and the next verse will talk about putting your foot on the accelerator. Okay. So this brings us to the end of this discussion. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.